Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Neon. I am not here with Geeky Sparkle. She's actually currently at the Sci-Fi Valley Con in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Thank you for those of you who did find out that we were there and you came yesterday. There were quite a few people. Thanks so much for stopping by. I did not expect anybody. People were traveling really far to come see us. It's really weird, but thank you to those of you who stopped by and said hello. We're going to talk about comic book conventions and the state, I guess, of comic book conventions right now in regards to where everybody is at politically with things, with this pandemic. And look, this video is not meant to get super political. I want to be very clear about that up front. I'm not going to sit here and lecture you one way or the other on mask mandates or vaccine mandates, for or against. I mean, I've got my personal opinions, but those are personal opinions. This is more about how mandates are going to affect convention turnout, and depending on where you're at. And we're already seeing, I believe, some of what's going to happen. I have to wonder if, should these mandates continue for a number of years, if this isn't going to break the convention scene somewhat. I mean, I don't think comic conventions are ever going to go away. We had a year off last year because of the pandemic, and it does look like things are kind of bouncing back, but not as quickly as I thought they would. We did Steel City Con earlier this year in the summer, and it was actually pretty busy. Now, this is in Pittsburgh, but again, this shows the difference between locations, where you're at geographically, politically. This is in the summer in Pittsburgh, and hardly anybody wore a mask, I have to tell you. And in fact, Sci-Fi Valley Con, hardly anybody was wearing masks. That includes the people working there. Some of the people working there are wearing masks, but that includes the celebrities they had, and there are very few celebrities who are actually going out, I guess, to cons now because of the pandemic. And some of them, like I think is Marina Sirtis, was very vocal. She's not doing any cons until every single person in this country is vaccinated. Well, good luck with that, because I don't think that's ever going to happen. Based on where we're at right now, that is not going to happen. So you're going to have to decide if it's worth it to you. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about the Pittsburgh comic book scene. I kind of want to talk about it because I don't think people realize that Pittsburgh has as many conventions as they do. That Pennsylvania actually has a number of comic book conventions, pop culture conventions, anime conventions, quite a few for the size of the state. In fact, theoretically, you could make a living just doing Pennsylvania comic conventions if you hit every one of them all over the state, or at least you could before the pandemic, But let's talk about this. Let's talk about it. Before we get into it any further, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants. Guys, over 236,000 subs. Thank you for the support. Greatly appreciate it. We do talk about comic books, comic book culture, pop culture, and occasionally we talk about pop culture and how it dovetails with, I guess whatever you want to call it, the culture wars or politics or whatever. Politics have crept into pop culture. It's been a lot more invasive over the last couple of years, obviously, for a number of reasons. And this year's big hot button in the pop culture scene is, of course, mandates, mask mandates, vaccine mandates, etc. There's been a lot of chatter about how successful the New York Comic Con was. Well, all indications are that it was about half the attendance that they're used to. Now, you think with all the pent-up demand that there would be more people, but there's a fly in the ointment here. The fly in the ointment is that they are requiring masks and they are requiring proof of vaccination. Of course, this is one of the largest conventions, gatherings, public gatherings in New York City. So it doesn't surprise me that is the case. Another convention did surprise me, though, and we're going to talk about that a bit later. Tekko, the largest anime con in Pittsburgh, is requiring vaccination, proof of vaccination. It's going to be in December, and they're getting a lot of pushback on Facebook. I don't see this ending well for them, given where they're at geographically, given that all the other cons in the area, or most of them, don't require masks or vaccines. I don't think it's gonna go very well for them. Again, armchair observation. Financially, it's not going to go well for them. But yeah, New York Comic Con back in person. Back live, 150,000 people versus the normal, 250 to 300,000 to get. So about half the attendance. And, I was watching some videos, people walking around. And I got to tell you, as somebody who's done New York Comic Con in the past, this is a very light crowd. New York Comic Con. Now, this is, I think, Friday. Is this on Friday? New York Comic Con, generally, for those of you who have not been, is so busy that you can't walk. It's so busy that if you have a table at New York Comic Con, you have to strategically plan your bathroom breaks and your lunch break. Like, how do I get to the bathroom? The bathroom is only a couple of 100 feet from my table, but I need to be able to cut through the crowd. So I think my bathroom break is going to take me about an hour, to get through. That's how it rolls. So this for New York Comic Con is a nothing burger. I mean, this is a nothing burger, right, guys? And I'm sure they still did well. I'm sure New York Comic Con is doing better than most cons now. San Diego wasn't live this year. I don't think San Diego was live this year. DC Fandom is going to be next weekend. It's going to be another online convention. But I think who's this coming from? Walking Commuter. So you can check out the original video. It's been embedded in a couple of different articles. But again, this is a nothing burger crowd for New York Comic Con, about half the attendance. And I have to think that the mandates are a big reason why, because regardless of being in New York City or not being in New York City, you have vendors from all over the country. You have attendees from all over the country. You have celebrities, that actually, believe it or not, are all over the place politically. And even if they're not very outspoken, not everybody's Letitia Wright, So you've got people that are like, well, I'm just, if they're going to force us, I'm not going, or it's not worth it, or I'm going to wait and see what happens next year. Now, if you did go, I guess you had a chance to see Ghostbusters Afterlife, and I'm incredibly jealous of that. I would have loved to have seen Ghostbusters Afterlife, but they had a surprise screening. Everything I've heard is it's very, very good. So definitely looking forward to it. But that's neither here nor there. Now, Bleeding Cool put up an article about the mask mandates and the vaccines. And one large retailer that they're not naming has been ejected from New York Comic Con for refusing to wear a mask. Now, again, you're allowed to have differing opinions on this. The purpose of the video is not to tell you what to do. But I'm also like, if you knew what the rules were before you went, why'd you go? I would have been like, well, piss off. I don't want to wear a mask. I don't want to have to prove my vaccination status. I'm not comfortable with that. So I'm just not going to go. I'm not going to go this year. Unless they paid for the table, a couple of years ago. I have no idea. Of course, not saying who it was. It said a sizable retailer. So let's talk about this, and we'll talk about, kind of some of the other cons and how the mask mandates and vaccine mandates are absolutely going to throw a wrench into it, because just like everything else in this country, people were split down the middle. People were all over the place with the mask mandates and the vaccine mandates. You have people that, might even personally be vaccinated and might be pro-vaccine that don't think people should be forced to prove their status, So it's not just a black and white. This isn't a black and white situation. And we're definitely going to see conventions take a hit. They were already struggling to come back. And I'm not saying conventions are going to disappear or it's the kiss of death or anything like that. But I think as long as we're in this pandemic, as long as there are mandates, I think people need to temper their financial expectations for sure. I can tell you, even Sci-Fi Valley Con, where there are no mandates, the attendance was about a third of what it usually is. I think the habit has been broken. A lot of people did like all these cons. Now, we saw a lot of people at Steel City Con, the first one this year. I didn't go to the second one. They do it 3 times a year. And there were a lot of people there. And there was a lot of, quote unquote, pent up demand. But Sci-Fi Valley was just really light crowds. Really light crowds. It was great if you wanted to buy stuff. There's all kinds of stuff to buy and you didn't have to fight anybody for it. But anyway, let's talk about this. New York Comic Con. Retailer ejected from New York Comic Con for refusing to wear a mask. New York Comic Con reissued the following warning for their show this weekend, saying, reminder, masks are required at all times while attending New York Comic Con, except while seated. When eating or drinking, be safe, be cool, and have fun. Face coverings. Everyone is required to wear an approved face covering while attending New York Comic Con. For more details and requirements about face coverings, please click here. Okay, got it. Costume and cosplay. Face coverings must be visible at all times. For this reason, headwear and cosplay pieces which cover the face in a manner which does not visibly fit the face covering requirements will not be permitted. In other words, I guess you can't wear a Darth Vader helmet and not have a face mask underneath the helmet. It's kind of like I bought a hooded Cobra Commander yesterday at Sci-Fi Valley Con. And as a kid, I always wondered what was under the hood. And I got him, I took the hood off, and he had a face mask underneath the hood. It was like, well, that's disappointing. He just looks like a regular Cobra Trooper. Well, at least he wasn't blue with a bunch of eyeballs all over his head, right? Reports came to Bleeding Cool that while mask wearing was the norm at the New York Comic Con, it is in New York City. New York City. There were plenty of exceptions necessitating the New York CC's reiteration of their attendance policy, but that for the most, the policy wasn't being enforced by anyone. However, well, yeah, how are you going to police 150,000 people? However, that appeared to suddenly take a left turn later in the day, after plenty of rumors we received as to the fact My Little Pony comic book artist Andy Price, and we put his name in bold, this guy's a hero, posted from New York Comic Con saying, so yeah, it's true, a large vendor at New York Comic Con was kicked out today for refusing to wear masks. Not only was it a mandate of the convention, it was mandated by the city. I feel zero pity for them. Get out. Oh, Andy, come on. That's mean. Price also noted that some attendees were now being challenged as well. When security catches them, they're out. I've seen a couple warned and a couple escorted out. Again, I am of two minds on this one. If they made it very clear that these were the rules, you didn't have to go. That being said, if they made it very clear these are the rules, you don't have to go. A lot of people are going to say, yep, fine, I'm not going. I'm not going because you guys are enforcing these rules. And that's probably why we have 150,000 people instead of 250,000 people. Because even in New York City, not everybody is cool with the masks. Now, if anyone has further details, feel free to. If anybody else wants to narc, contact Rich. Send Rich an email. This is gonna be a huge issue for people, and I think for celebrities too, for and against, and it's gonna hurt cons coming back. So I put this. I found out last night. I had a friend, you know who you are, DM me last night and say, "Hey, did you hear about Tekko?" Now Tekko is the largest, I believe, the largest anime con in at least the Pittsburgh area. I don't think statewide it's the largest, but it's pretty sizable. It was Tekko Shokan, and now it's Tekko Con. It's at the David Lawrence Center. I think it's still at David Lawrence, which is a huge convention center. A very nice center, by the way, if you've never been there. But we actually stuck up for them before. A couple of years ago, they were getting blasted for their association with Vic Mignogna. They had Vic in a couple of times, and they actually had to put a statement out saying, hey, when we had Vic here, there were no shenanigans. We had him here a couple of years ago, and there were no shenanigans going on. And I don't think they've invited him back since all the drama. But I mean, the fact that whoever has it in for Vic is going through and finding every convention that has ever had him as a guest ever, which that's a sizable amount of conventions. That's a lot of conventions, right? Because he was, I think still is, one of the most popular voice actors out there. He played some very notable roles, and he was a guest at many, many conventions. And he's always a huge draw. Always a huge draw. So we actually went to bat for them. This was, 2 years ago? 2 years ago. Because, yeah, they shouldn't have to put a statement out. Like, we had Vic here 2 years ago before any of this stuff, and we had to put a statement out that no, there were no shenanigans. We did an investigation. Nothing weird went on. Back off. Now, apparently, they're being pressured into this, requiring proof of vaccination, because this is not a citywide thing. Unlike New York City, Pittsburgh does not have a citywide vaccine mandate yet. Employees, I believe city employees do. But as far as going to nightclubs and bars and conventions and stuff like that, Pittsburgh, I don't even think they're thinking about it yet. Now, individual establishments, I'm sure, will make that decision. People are saying they think Tekko got pushed into it by the Twitterati, but they're requiring proof of vaccination. Now, I can tell you, living in Western Pennsylvania, going to a lot of these conventions, a lot of the people we just saw here at Sci-Fi Valley Con not wearing masks. Okay. A lot of the people that we saw at Steel City Con not wearing masks. These are a lot of the same people that would be going to Tekko. They're not going to be happy with this. They're not going to go. And not everybody's going to get the memo. And I know damn well what's going to happen is we're going to have families show up and their kids are going to be all dressed up like Dragon Ball characters or whatever, little Goku. We're going to have Demon Slayer. And they're going to get turned away because they didn't read that they need to have masks or need to have proof of vaccination. Now, I guess you have an option that you can take a test or something a day or two before you go in, but that's a pain in the ass. And who's going to do that? You're there to have fun. Who is going to do that? Nobody's going to do that. So what I'm saying in this is that this is yet another wrinkle in cons coming back online because you've effectively, depending on the geographic area, depending on the political leanings of that area, you've effectively cut your potential consumer base in half. Again, over politics. Again. So here's the post on Facebook. I didn't even see it. I haven't really followed what Tekko is doing because we haven't gone in a number of years, but it's usually a very, very busy convention. And in Western Pennsylvania especially, I do not see them being busy at all this year. People are going to be pissed. So this is what they said September 29th. Seems there's still some pandemic policy questions regarding Tekko 2021, which is in December. Our apologies for allowing any misunderstanding. We want to be very clear. Masks will be required, and yes, vaccination or a negative test within 72 hours of attending. Again, taking a test before going, that's going to be a pain in the ass. So just come out and see Vax Pass. That's basically what they're going to do, like New York Comic Con, but in an area that's not nearly as far left as New York. There are questions still to be answered about how this is managed. Yeah, good questions. So please continue to be patient with us while we finalize the details. At the very least, we'll be asking for vaccination cards to test result documents. We're hopeful there's more efficient and accurate ways to facilitate this. We realize some will be uncomfortable with this, but we do agree with many that is what is safest for the community. If this causes you to be unable to attend, you can transfer your ticket. Well, at least they're giving people the option. You can transfer your ticket to another attendee. You can request to have the ticket transferred to July of next year. So, I will give them credit for that. At least they're not like, well, piss off, you're out of money. Tough shit. You should have just taken the vaccine and just gotten it over with. At least they're not doing that. They're like, no, you can defer it until next year or transfer it to somebody else. I will give them props for that. But what I'm saying is this is absolutely going to cut down on the attendance of the show. And they missed a show last year. Realistically, how long can these conventions go with diminished crowds or having to cancel or, what I'm saying? Lack of guests because guests don't feel safe going out or, they themselves are not comfortable with the mandates. I don't know. Here's somebody bringing up that, even with the vaccine, it can still be spread. But they're like, yeah, we understand. We'll see you next year. This person, top fan. Anyone missing this wild ride? Community, no COVID requirements. Tekko, requirements are not yet final. We'll update you when we know. Community, your lack of enforcement now speaks volumes. Bye. Yeah, I can totally see this. This is the same con that was dogpiled for having Vic Mignogna as a guest a couple of years before all hell broke loose. So absolutely. Tekko, here's our plan so far and our challenges. We're still working on it. Community, yeah, we bullied them into submission. Also the community, really? You can't afford to enforce it? Tekko, we weren't saying we can't force it. We're looking for the best and most practical way to do it. Why are you asking for papers? Bye. Yeah, pretty much. It's not gonna do well. Here's somebody else is like it's medical discrimination. Look, again, private business, they can do whatever they want. But you're also a consumer and you can take your money wherever you want to take it. So if you're not comfortable with the rules, you're free to skip out. And I think a lot of people are going to. So this kind of brings me to the next big issue is, are we going to have, because we're seeing kind of a parallel comic book industry pop up, very divided comic book industry, and one is thriving financially. And I'm hearing rumors that things are going to get worse for the mainstream here very, very soon. Don't want to tip my hand. I don't want to, things are going to get really bad. Things are going to get really bad for the mainstream here very soon. We have an alternative comic book industry that is absolutely thriving right now. People are hungry for content that is kind of a throwback to when comics were fun before things got weirdly political. Is the same thing going to happen with comic book conventions? Will we actually have like parallel comic book conventions? Because look at the anime cons in Texas, how well they're doing. Look at, again, Steel City was crazy busy over the summer. And are we going to have cons that are like, yeah, we're not going to really push, unless we're forced to because of where we're at, we're not going to push, for mandates and stuff like that. We're just going to let people make their own decisions. If they're comfortable coming or not coming, that's completely on them. And then all the people who would have gone to like New York Comic Con instead go to these other conventions, I think it's going to happen. It depends on how long this thing is dragged out, right? But I think it's going to happen. I think we're going to have parallel pop culture scenes. We're going to have, the right and the left. And I hate to break it down, be, that black and white, because most people are somewhere in the middle, but I think we are. I think we're going to have, pop culture scenes that are more like urban, New York and Portland, and they're going to have their comic book scene with their mainstream comics or indie comics or whatever, and their conventions run the way they want their conventions to be run, and lots of diversity and inclusion initiatives and yada, yada, yada. And they're free to do that. Absolutely. But I think a lot of the middle of the road people, and especially the more conservative leaning people, they're going to go to other conventions that are more of a throwback to the way things were like 10 years ago. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens. And I looking at this whole scene, looking at Hollywood. I mean, look how divided Hollywood is now. It's like, it's not everybody's in lockstep. Again, look at Letitia Wright. Look at the people who haven't come out and made statements, political statements or statements about mandates or whatever, and how they're getting dogpiled too, because it's like, well, silence is the same as agreeing. Are those celebrities going to get fed up, and are we going to have an alternate Hollywood in like Florida or Texas? I don't know. I don't know, guys. It's really interesting. It's like, I almost feel like, the country is split right down the middle. It's like we're living in two different countries, but, geographically we're not, but idealistically we absolutely are. And it's going to affect pop culture. It's absolutely going to affect pop culture. We're going to have two different pop culture scenes for sure. So I'm going to wrap this one up. Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. We'll talk later.